Hello and welcome to Wide Open Throttle, a very special edition coming from the floor of the New York Auto Show. And a very special guest joining our roundtable this week, Infiniti President Johan De Nysschen. Johan, welcome, and an interesting week for you this week. Big announcement, Sebastian Vettel, Director of Performance. What does that mean?
Well, firstly, it means we blew the entire headcount budget cost on one guy. But as Director of Performance, Sebastian's task is to keep us true to the Infiniti brand values.
Right.
We're a performance car company. We need to make sure that that gets translated into the product. And his job is to make sure that at every stage of the development process, we live up to our own very high standards and we deliver on our promise. Great drivers' cars.
But is he really going to be hands-on with the cars? I mean, Ayrton Senna worked with Honda on the NSX famously, but how hands-on is he going to be?
He's going to be doing a lot of driving, and his input will be validated at several times during the development stages of the car. I really have asked him personally to give us very critical feedback, and our engineers are on board. They've gone through one lap of this with this process with the Q50. And we are seeking to expand that because it really proved to be very, very valuable input.
So can a racing driver really give the sort of feedback that's valuable in a road car? Well, I mean,
to some extent, yes. I mean, we had this experience recently with Randy and the Viper.
Starting our lap at Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca. A little bit of power oversteer off the hairpin.
Where, you know, his big complaint was that the Viper oversteered way too much, and that was sort of an SRT brand value. They wanted a car that was difficult to control, and he said, hey, look, you can't put the power down. If you make it so it doesn't oversteer as much, it'll go around a track faster. And it turned out he was right. So yeah, I think there is a lot of validity in what they can offer.
Developing a car is a very complex process, and we've seen this with you know, when we drove the M37, how long ago was that, Johnny?
About a year-ish, yeah, something like that.
We were fairly critical on, you know, some of the dynamic qualities of the car, and I understand that you've really taken that on board and seeking to address some of the issues we found with the car.
The points of criticism that you had came in at a very high standard. So the car actually is very, very capable. But there's a difference between very good and excellent. And we really have taken your feedback to heart. I certainly am one that wants to be very, very proud of the products we make. You know, excellence is our only standard. That's what is acceptable. And it was a nice reference point. And so I spent quite a bit of time test driving the car with our chief vehicle engineer and the powertrain and chassis engineers to firstly check if you were right, and then to see how we could go about improving the car.
We've had that original car we tested all those months ago, plus a car with some changes. It's still an evolutionary car in there, and we've driven them back to back. And what have we found?
Well, Scott and I took them on some pretty extensive loops together, and what we found was that, you know, the things we griped about, like, you know, like the kind of the strange kind of throttle, like it was
very
initially
touchy,
very jumpy,
response.
but then it would jump up. So the throttle's been smoothed out, the transmission's been improved, the steering's been greatly improved, and that might be the biggest single improvement. And the ride quality's changed. It's not as lazy as it was. It might be maybe, you know, too harsh, although, you know, it's a mule, it's not finished. But it was, you know, most of the things that we got, you know, the reason it came in 4th out of 4, you've addressed. And I mean, Scott can talk too, but
it frustrated me in that test because it was something I'd found before on other Infinitis as well, is that it felt like on the sporty models, all the inputs have just been turned up to the absolute maximum, that if you just touch the throttle, the car would jump and the transmission would shift hard, and if you just barely turn the wheel, it would dart around a bit. It was so sensitive that it didn't make it any fun to drive. And so by turning those down a bit, making them much smoother, and one of the things I just noticed that the steering was much more linear, and the transmission wasn't so jerky. So it was.
Well, let me tell you some of the things we did. Firstly, on the throttle, we went and revisited the throttle mapping, so you get a much more linear response. I think the idea was very aggressive bite from the throttle, so you kind of get this acceleration. But as you say, you need to like progress into it. On the steering, we changed the tolerances, far tighter tolerances. Transmission, we took a whole half a second off the downshift time. We sped up the upshifts in response to the paddle shifter by fine-tuning the oil pressure in the box, and certainly you'd encountered that the transmission went into its emergency fail-safe mode to protect the transmission. We've added oil cooler, the suspension movements, we've changed spring settings and dampers to get better body control. And so also the traction control kicks in a lot later.
One of the things I'm very sensitive to is the tactile DNA of a car. I mean, for years you could get into a BMW blindfolded and know you were driving one because of all the steering inputs, the pedal inputs and all that sort of thing. So are you looking to evolve a tactile DNA for?
Absolutely. I think this is got to be something that we translate from the brand values into the cars. And you've got to get that same driving experience and dynamic performance regardless of which market segment you're in. I think this is one of the areas where Infiniti has to evolve still. So you get far more commonality between a Q50 and even a QX80. And I think this is part of what the team and I are working on to bring to the market.
You mentioned the names there, Q50 and QX. What's the view around the table as to the new naming strategy?
I understand why people are so worried about it, because it's a very sharp, very immediate change to suddenly be, all the names are gone. It's been a JX35 for 5 minutes, but now it's something else. We've changed everything. I think it makes sense, but I understand why people are shocked about it.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around the numbers myself. To me, knowing the history of the cars and where they're from, I still like, names like, Skyline. I think those are great names. And going strictly alphanumeric definitely has its pluses and minuses, but it will definitely take some getting used to, I think.
How hard a sell was it within the organization?
It wasn't a hard sell at all because it was derived at in a very logical way. Believe me, I didn't come into the company and say, now let me see, what can I change? Great, let's change the names.
Well,
Not at all.
What I worry about, again, I think it's very logical, and I've had the long form explanation how that, we can go from Q50 and then the top of the range, there could be a Q90, and this. I wonder if it's one of these situations where kind of what BMW is running into though, where logic kind of gets in the way of beauty in a sense, because with BMW you'll be able to go buy an M45 S-Drive IS Grand Coupe, and I know what that means.
We will aspire to get our names that complex, but we aren't there yet.
Yes.
Let me perhaps just again elaborate on why we did this.
Yes.
One of the issues that faces us is we're a US-centric brand, and our product portfolio has been kind of profiled around that idea. We've got to take Infiniti global. That means we have to broaden the product range to get a more effective coverage of the spectrum of the premium market. That means new product concepts, new market segments, new powertrains. And we went through a lot of work analyzing the white space in the premium sector globally, and we figured out which cars we would need to position where to cover from our current less than 60% to a little bit around short of 90% of the available market over the next 5 or 6 years. So now, once we have developed the whole ideal product portfolio, somebody said, well, what are we going to call all these cars?
Right.
That then started the process, trademark search. And you guys will not believe me. There are no free alphanumeric combinations left. And we can get into the debate on whether it's real names or not, but in the premium sector, it is just better to spend your money on the brand, and the model nomenclature comes second. When we went through this discovery, we reached the conclusion that the only trademark we actually own is Q.
Right.
And that was born then. Q for cars, QX for the crossovers, and the number denotes the position in the hierarchy.
And I would point out, the one car, I think if you say like, okay, Infiniti, you guys have to bring a car and put it on the lawn at Pebble. The only car you can maybe do that with is the first gen Q45. So there is some brand value there. So I get that. I just worry that you're losing G, which I think a lot of people.
And that was hard. There's a lot of brand equity in G.
But losing EX, losing JX, doesn't matter.
I just want to touch on something that you peripherally touched on is, and you were at Audi before, and have the German premium brands written a playbook for anyone who wants to get into that space? If you look at where the models are, how you have to structure your lineup, how you have to walk the customer through different iterations.
Angus, I think one could come to that conclusion. On the other hand, we all read the same tea leaves. And you know where the market segments are, you know what the customer demographics look like, you know where the products are to be positioned. And in the end, we all reached the same conclusion. We can't argue, the Germans do this pretty well. So while I don't think everybody wants to copy them directly, it's probably not a bad idea to look at what works for others.
What do you usually drive? I mean, do you get the chance to drive much? Hong Kong, where the company headquarters is, isn't exactly car paradise, is it?
Well, I tell you, actually, in the 8 odd months that I have now lived there, I have managed to put 8,000 kilometers on my car, which is a FX50S.
In and around Hong Kong?
I think it's mostly shuttling to the airport.
Have you had much of a chance to look around the New York show here? Has anything taken your fancy?
I've spent most of my time at the show locked in meeting rooms and in interviews, but I know that there's some interesting cars. Certainly we take note of the new compact entry from Mercedes, interesting car. The other end, I believe these fellows, Rolls-Royce, have some interesting products as well, and a lot of interesting stuff in between too.
Cadillac has a new CTS, and they're trying to resurge, they're trying to rebuild their brand very strongly as well. Are you concerned about increased competition in the luxury markets?
The Cadillac guys, I think, have done a fine job over the years now of really revitalizing that brand, and I wish them every success.
Okay, so on that note, Johan, I think we better let you go and walk the show, check out the opposition, see what's out there and what's worth looking at. There's a few interesting things here. So thank you for joining us on this round table, and thank you for watching Wide Open Throttle. Make sure you tune in next week. See you then. Cheers.
Cheers.